mark.
On your mark.
Get set.
Get set.
Now ready.
Ready, go.
Provocative, engaging, and usually quite a lady.
Okay, they're asking for it.
Deborah, go.
On today's podcast, we're going to take a look at the Daniel Penny case. That one is nearing a close for sure. Also, media madness about Trump's cabinet selections. Then we'll have a couple of news items, and we'll kick the podcast off today with Whoopi's rebuttal. Well, you probably have heard by now that Whoopi Goldberg, she stirred up the pot. She was on The View and she was there to celebrate her birthday. But she talked about what happened when she tried to order this special little cute cupcake that she likes. It's not even a cupcake. It's like an angel food cake with some whipped cream and a cherry on top. But she says she loves it. Now, according to Whoopi, she called this bakery, this is a small family-owned bakery. They've been in business close to 150 years, generation to generation. Just a small little spot, little storefront. But Whoopi says she called them and she identified herself as being who she is, Whoopi Goldberg. She wanted, I think, like 48 of those cakes. And she was told, now this is in the story as I initially read it. According to Whoopi, she was told by the woman that she did not want to commit to an order so far out in advance. I think it was like 2 weeks lead time. She said she didn't want to do that because they had been having problems with their boiler system. The building is close to 100 years old, and she just said that all the problems, she couldn't commit. Okay, according to Whoopi, I guess about a week or so later, she sends someone in. They order the 48 cakes. The 48 cakes were made for them. They take them. They go back to the studio, and that's that. So Whoopi is on television, and she's talking about the fact, the Charlotte Russe, I think is the name of that cake, how she tried to get the cake, but she says, not because I'm a woman, I think they denied me my order because of my left-leaning politics. And everybody was like aghast. And Sarah spit her cake out. Like, I'm not eating this if they discriminated against you. So Whoopi says, I don't know, but I think that's what it was. So quite naturally, everybody that watches the program, they were wondering, well, who was the bakery? Whoopi did not name the bakery, but they did have the cakes sitting there. And they have this cute little wrapping, little polka dots. So apparently someone from one of the publications said, hey, come on, I know who makes these things, because I guess that packaging is unique to the bakery. They call the bakery. They want to know, so what happened? The owner, she says, I'll tell you what happened. We got a call from Whoopi. I told Whoopi that I didn't want to commit. I couldn't do it that far out because sometimes this thing breaks down and we can't deliver. Yeah, but somebody came in and placed the same order and they got it. Yeah, they did get it because she came in. We were up and running. We weren't having any problems that day. We quickly made the order and out the door it went. Now, to Whoopi, the woman was lying. Clearly, she was suggesting that the woman was lying, that the woman just didn't want to serve her because of her left-leaning politics. For me, I just can't go with Whoopi on this one. It is possible. Anything's possible, but it just doesn't add up. Here we have a small bakery, a small family-owned bakery. Here we have the owner who was well aware who was placing the order. Now, is it possible that she didn't want to commit to that order 2 weeks out because she was having problems with her boiler and she could disappoint and not have them ready? Is that possible? And then what happens? She didn't know, but maybe Whoopi would have said, as much as I love these cakes, this bakery, they disappointed me. I called 2 weeks in advance and they still didn't have it ready. That could have happened. Perhaps that's what the owner was concerned about. I think that's totally feasible. But since all of the whirlwind of media regarding this story has occurred, Whoopi has decided to speak up about it, as she well should. Let's take a listen to what Whoopi has to say.
So there seems to be a lot of talk about the dessert I requested for my birthday show. I never mentioned the name of the bakery or the location. It does seem a little odd that when we called a few weeks before my birthday and we were told they couldn't process the order for my birthday because of an equipment failure, but somehow they were able to accept an order of a different 48 of the same dessert when somebody else called without using my name. But it's all okay, y'all, because I enjoyed my delicious dessert and I had a happy, sweet birthday. Nothing better than that.
So, as you heard, Whoopi, and by the way, I think she was at home when she recorded that. Looks like she may have been in a small room off of her kitchen. That's what it looked like. But Whoopi, as she told the story, the series of events, one thing I think she kind of glossed over and even maybe tweaked a little bit. Ms. Holterman, the woman that owns the bakery, the woman who Whoopi spoke with, the woman, even in Entertainment Weekly, who actually interviewed her, said, yes, I spoke with Whoopi. I told her that I was not comfortable committing to an order so far in advance because of the problems with our boiler system. They were having problems. And apparently that's the issue right there. Whoopi, instead of just being, okay, I can deal with that, she goes on television with all the cakes. Yes, someone else picked the cakes up for her on the day that they ordered it, just walked in and ordered, it was 50 of these cakes. But instead of Whoopi just sitting down and enjoying the cakes and that's that, she goes on and she makes this story. And I think she did it just for applause, just because of a lot of these celebrities, they are very narcissistic. And she did not like the idea, not even thinking about the potential ramifications for the bakery. So you could be saying, well, Deborah, she didn't name the bakery. She didn't say where the bakery was located. Well, what's interesting is so many viewers of The View, they called the bakery. People didn't need to have the name. They didn't need to have the location. But those familiar in that area, which, by the way, that's the oldest bakery in New York State, they started calling them. But surprisingly, what they were doing and what they were saying was, hey, what can I do to help? Here's $50. I'm sending $50. I don't even want the cake. Send them to the schools. People were trying to help because, it doesn't take a whole lot of business sense to figure this out. If a small business is bombarded by a bunch of negativity, if a major celebrity insinuates, and it was, again, not hard to figure out who the bakery was because, by the way, nobody else makes this particular dessert with that name. So there you go again, another identifier. But the point here is a small business could really be destroyed by virtue of a lot of negative media, by virtue of a major celebrity indicating that they are discriminatory. And if you don't think it could happen, just remember there was a Christian bakery and they decided that we're going to hold true to our values, our beliefs, and they did not want to make a birthday cake for a gay couple. Now, what they really didn't publicize, and this is just an aside, was that the owners of the Christian bakery, they went above and beyond the call of duty, trying to find another bakery that suited the gay couple. But the gay couple, they stood firm. No, we only want the cake from you. Now, it doesn't take a political genius to figure out what was really happening. They had heard that this couple, they're firm in their values and their beliefs, and they will not bend. And they wanted to make an example of them. So they went there. They knew they would be rejected. What they didn't know was that the couple would very kindly call around and ask other bakers to fulfill that order. They did that. It wasn't good enough. So long story short, that couple, they went through years of litigation and ultimately that business is closed. So that really could have happened to the Holderman Bakery. Thankfully, they were pretty smart. They immediately called a press conference. They wanted to get ahead of it. That's what you do. You get ahead of the issue. And people stood with them. So I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that Whoopi is right? That she was being discriminated against because of her political views? Or do you think Whoopi jumped the gun, was all full of herself, and made an unnecessary public complaint? Clearly, that's where I stand. That was totally unnecessary. By the way, the boiler has been replaced. The case against Daniel Penny, the former Marine who on a New York subway train, he stepped in to protect the riders because one person, Jordan Neely, he was there. He was threatening people on the train, saying he wanted to kill people, and very erratic behavior, very aggressive behavior, clearly very threatening behavior. And everybody, kind of just looked like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And here's one guy that said, well, here's what I'm going to do. He steps up, he confronts Jordan Neely, takes him down, puts a hold on him. Some people said it was a chokehold. Others said it was a deadly chokehold. Now today, Daniel Penny is fighting for his freedom because he faces 15 years, if not more. Well, here's an update on the story. Let's go first to Alice Gaynor from CBS New York, who gives us an update. And there was even a surprise witness in this case.
Eric Gonzalez said he was waving his hand to get Daniel Penny's attention to let him know he was there to help, telling jurors, I said, I'm going to grab his hand so you can let go. Gonzalez grabs Jordan Neely's arm. Penny, who was restraining Neely, did not let go. Gonzalez was not on board the F train when witnesses say an irate Neely entered yelling threats on May 1st, 2023. Gonzalez was in the Broadway Lafayette station when he entered the stopped train and saw the men on the floor. Gonzalez testified Neely tapped someone, indicating he wanted to be released, to which Gonzalez told the jury he said, we're not going to let you go until cops arrive. At some point, Jordan Neely's body goes limp and I let go. Then he says Penny let go. Gonzalez says he put Neely on his side, checked and found a pulse, then left because he was scared that a person could die. After learning Neely had died and seeing his picture associated with the incident, Gonzalez went into hiding, fearful he'd be prosecuted, explaining he even lied to prosecutors when he first met them about being on the F train when the incident began, concocting a story that Neely attacked him so that he could justify his actions. There's all these protests going on. I'm scared for myself, scared for my family. Gonzalez was given immunity. Prosecutors say Penny's intentions were good, but argue he used excessive force. Penny has pleaded not guilty to second-degree manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. Another passenger, police officer, and a couple of EMTs also took the stand today. The trial resumes Thursday.
I think it's fair to say that this is a tragic story. It's tragic because, number one, someone has lost their life. But it's also tragic because someone who was trying to help others, who was trying to protect others, may be incarcerated for a good number of years. Daniel Penny is 24 years old. And yes, he does face a lengthy prison sentence. When it comes to Jordan Neely, that also is a very sad story. It's sad because Jordan Neely, his mother was murdered by her boyfriend. They found her body in a suitcase down by, I don't know if it was the Hudson River, but down by a river. And he was called in to testify that his mother had been the victim of domestic abuse. They said not long after that, he suffered from depression and other mental illness issues. I suspect, however, that he probably was suffering those issues before his mother was killed. If he saw his mother being abused, and she probably was viciously abused, that does contribute to a child's depression and other emotional issues. But Jordan Neely, he'd been arrested 42 times, including for the unprovoked assault of 3 women on the subway. He was clearly mentally ill. He had been in and out of hospitals. He was frequently homeless. We've all seen Jordan Neely. Not that Jordan Neely, but we've seen similar people. Now, I'm watching his family members, and particularly his uncle, who pretty much is serving as the family spokesperson. I get that. Some people feel, well, look, now they come out of the woodwork. I get it. This is their loved one who was sick. He was homeless, frequently homeless. Now, he wasn't living with any of them, but that is not even unexpected, because the problem is when you have people with mental illness and mental illness that goes untreated, as his was, it was untreated. Well, they typically cannot live in an environment, again, if they haven't been on their meds or if they're not receiving regular treatment. So it's really no surprise that he was out on the streets. But Jordan Neely, he was pretty much an exceptional case. And by that, I mean, there are tens of thousands of people in New York, no question about it, who are suffering from some form of mental illness. What makes him a little bit different is that Jordan Neely was on New York City's list of mentally ill people who are in need of assistance and treatment. So they were well aware of him. You would think they would be with 42 arrests. But as you might also expect, there is no shortage of people, and these are people who are just flat out users. They take every opportunity to see how they can take advantage. And I'm talking about people like AOC and a couple of other Democrat politicians out of New York. They're out there. They've been talking about how racism has caused Jordan Neely to lose his life. There is Al Sharpton, who, by the way, delivered the eulogy at Jordan Neely's funeral. Well, Al Sharpton said that, and I'm quoting here, Penny wasn't a good Samaritan because good Samaritans help those in trouble. They don't choke him out. Now, unless he didn't understand the full scope of what really happened on that train, Daniel Penny was helping people. There have been numerous people who were on the train that day that said that they were afraid. They were frightened, not to death, but they were really, really scared. They didn't know what Jordan Neely was capable of doing. Anytime someone comes on a train looking wild-eyed, they say he was very, very dirty, physically dirty, unkempt clothes. He was just filthy. And he came into the train and he says, I'm going to kill everybody. And I could go to prison for a long time and I don't care. I don't care if I go to prison. Well, when he said that, Daniel Penny, being a former Marine, he turned his attention to him. And he knew that this guy is capable of doing what he said. Maybe he can't kill everybody, but he just might try and take someone out. Did he have a weapon? Nobody knew that. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But he made the proclamation, I'm going to kill everybody, and I don't care if I go to prison for a long time. Doesn't matter to me. So Daniel Penny steps up to take control of the situation. But he wasn't the only one, and that's what's interesting. As we heard in the piece from ABC New York, CBS New York rather, this guy Rodriguez, he took part. There were also other men that took part, and we have not heard anything from them. I was watching this woman. She was so grateful that these men stood up and did something. Of course, all of that doesn't change the fact that Jordan Neely, he lost his life. So I'm just wondering, though, if you look at a scale from, let's say, 1 to 10, 1 being not that concerned and 10 being very concerned, on a scale of 1 to 10, if you were in a similar situation, if you're on a train and someone walks in filthy, acting extremely erratic, saying that he's going to kill everybody and he doesn't care if he goes to prison for a long time, it doesn't matter to him, you're going to die. If someone steps up and subdues that person, and let's say they use excessive force to hold him down until police come, on a scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are you about the use of excessive force? Because Penny maintains it was never his intention to kill him. He wanted to hold this guy down. This guy posed a real threat. But the issue is, yeah, but you used excessive force. You know what I'm thinking about? I guess it's been about a year, maybe 2 years now, on another New York City subway train. There was a woman there, and a guy was looking at her. And he came over to her and he said, you know what? Take your clothes off. I'm going to have sex with you. And he raped her right there. And nobody in a full train of people, nobody bothered to help this woman. But I'll tell you what they did do. They pulled out their phones. And no, they did not take their finger and dial 911. Nobody did that. What they did do, however, is to record the incident. Everybody held their phones up and they were recording what was happening, or they were looking the other way. I don't see what's happening. I know nothing. So I would guess, I'm just guessing here, but the victim on that train, the woman who was raped, I bet she wished that there was a Daniel Penny on her train. I bet she wishes that there were other men on the train that stood up and said, no, you're not going to rape her. You're going to be in big trouble here because we're going to take you down. I bet you she wishes there was somebody on the train like that. But no, there wasn't. There wasn't. And then I'm wondering too, because I think it's second-degree murder, negligent homicide. These are the charges that he's facing. If you were on that jury, would you vote to convict him? Would you vote to convict this 24-year-old guy who set out like anybody else that day to go and take care of his business, whatever it was, who happened to be on that train when Jordan Neely got on, harassing and threatening everyone, and you decide, I'm not going to let this guy just do this. And other men said, no, we're not. Granted, he was the one with the chokehold that held him down. But could you convict him? Would you convict him? Well, I don't live in the state of New York, so I have no need to worry about not being selected for jury duty. But if I were selected for that jury, I could not convict him. I just couldn't, because I think about what if I were on that train? I mean, there have been other women that Jordan Neely had assaulted. He had assaulted other women. I think even kicked a pregnant woman. I would be happy if someone stood up to protect me, to defend me. That's the way I look at it. And I promise you when I say this, my heart really does go out to Jordan Neely. And I'm going to tell you why it goes out to him. Because the system failed him. The system failed him. See, in this country, we are at a crisis level when it comes to the treatment of people with mental illness. We are. I know this. I have a mentally ill person in my family. And what I happen to know is, I believe it was back in the early 80s, everything changed because prior to that, people with mental illness, they weren't always treated very well. They were put in facilities and who knows what would happen in those facilities, often, not always. I remember Geraldo Rivera. He did a report. This was probably in the 70s, where he went inside one of these facilities. And what he found there was deplorable. There were people without clothes, sitting in dark rooms alone, sitting in rooms with groups of people, no interaction with anyone. This is where families would just dump their unwanted, or even people who they really just couldn't handle, because that really is the case with Jordan Neely. Even though, the uncle is out there now, our loved one, look what happened to him. The truth of the matter is they couldn't handle him. And we don't have a system in place to really treat our mentally ill. Now, we go to that point, that time when people who were mentally ill were just poorly treated. And then we get into the 80s when all of the legislation and the laws were put in place to protect them, to help them. Except here's the problem. The pendulum swung entirely too far in the other direction. And that's why we have a Jordan Neely today, because under the law, no one could have forced him to take his drugs. Under the law, were he to be hospitalized, he would have the full right to say, I'm gone. I'm leaving here. I think the minimum they have to stay is 3 days, and the maximum a mentally ill person can stay in a hospital is 7 days, unless, of course, they've tried to kill themselves or have tried to kill someone else, if they are a evident danger to themselves or someone else. Other than that, no matter what they do, walking around, licking the ground, taking their clothes off, walking down the street, threatening to kill people, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The law now puts the decision-making in the hands of the mentally ill. So there is no wonder that a Jordan Neely would have scores of arrests, that a Jordan Neely has attacked many people. We know of the 3 women that he assaulted on the subway. You cannot convince me there weren't many, many others. Many others. It's no wonder that he was repeatedly, frequently homeless. He was homeless because he's untreated. He's on New York City's list of mentally ill people in need of treatment and assistance. But what did anybody do about it? Nothing, except you get an Al Sharpton out there who has nothing to say about the conditions that actually led to Jordan Neely being in this unfortunate situation, being killed, being in a situation where he walks on a train and threatens to kill people and meets a very untimely death. Don't talk about that. Let me tell you what Eric Adams, New York City mayor, had to say, because I think he probably had the most reasonable response that I've heard so far. Eric Adams, he called Neely's death tragic and said there's a lot we don't know about what happened here. He said that initially. But then he later said Neely's death could have been prevented if he had received more mental health assistance. And then some reporter asked him about vigilantism, because they say he was also, meaning Daniel Penny, was a vigilante. He said, we cannot blanketly tell passengers what they should or should not do. This is the mayor of New York City, and you know why he said that? He said that because in the last 4-5 years, it's every man for himself in New York. You don't believe that? The incidence of people being assaulted and attacked on New York subway system has shot through the roof just in the last 4 years. People who are trying to defend themselves, let alone somebody else, they have found themselves on the wrong side of the law. Think about the guy who owned that bodega. When this punk walked in, decided he's going to take what he wants without paying for it, and threatens the life of the bodega owner. Well, that man decided, I'm going to defend myself. This guy's not going to kill me. If anybody's going to die, he's going to die, not me. And what happens? That man was up for murder charges. And those murder charges really would have stuck had it not been for the vocal protests of everyday people, because people pretty much rationed, wait a minute, somebody comes in and threatens to kill you and attempts to kill you, you defend yourself and you're the bad guy? Well, see, that is the environment in New York. That's the environment there. And that's really, really sad. And that's the reason why the very mayor even said, we can't blanketly say to people what they should or should not do in a situation like that. So the trial is set to move to where the defense will make their case, I believe they said, on Thursday, and then we'll see the outcome. And I don't want anybody to get away with murder, but it's not that cut and dry. It's not that black and white. It's not that simple. I say, thank goodness people are still willing to protect their fellow man. Although Al Sharpton would say, that's not good. He didn't protect Jordan Neely. And you see how twisted that is? Never mind the fact that this guy was threatening people, harassing people. Never mind that fact. It all boils down to, and I'm just going to say it like it is, Jordan Neely was black, Daniel Penny was white, and for opportunists, this is a golden moment. Okay, I want to update you on what I am calling FEMA-gate. If you'll recall, and you probably have heard by now, that a now former FEMA employee says that she was only following orders when she instructed her team on the ground during Hurricane Milton to avoid homes with Trump signs. And she says this wasn't something that I just decided to do based on my political views. This was from higher ups. Well, if you've noticed, you really haven't seen her anywhere on the media, not on the mainstream media. No one sitting down and talking to her to get her side of the story. For FEMA, the head, which is Deanne Criswell, she says that the employee that was fired, her name is Marley Washington, she says that, quote, it's a clear violation of FEMA's core values and principles. In other words, no matter what Miss Washington says, this was something she did, and it's just in violation of who we are. So there is someone who thankfully did sit down and talk with Miss Washington. And wait, I want to back up because actually I have seen her on Fox at night, but I haven't seen her on like ABC, CBS, NBC, or anything like that. But here's what she said to Roland Martin. Again, this is her effort, her attempt to give her side of the story.
If you look at the record, there is what we call a community trend. And unfortunately, it just so happened that the political hostility that was encountered by my team, and I was on 2 different teams during this deployment, they just so happened to have the Trump campaign signage. FEMA always preaches avoidance first and then de-escalation. So this is not isolated. This is a colossal event of avoidance, not just in the state of Florida, but you will find avoidance in the Carolinas. Senior leadership will lie to you and tell you that they do not know. But if you ask the DSA crew leads and specialists what they are experiencing in the field, they will tell you. Demand for FEMA to give you those incident reports. They will substantiate what is happening to us in the field.
So what Ms. Washington is saying, and you just heard her say it, is that we were instructed when you encounter harassment or some difficulty, you just avoid it, go around it. And her implication here is that that's where her problems occurred, is with homes that had Trump signs. Now, that may have happened. Maybe some goofball was upset because whatever happened, because they were in a natural disaster and they lost everything. And maybe they berated a FEMA worker. I can see that happening. But I'm highly suspicious, as a matter of fact, if every Trump home that they saw, they were going to be confronted by a hostile, angry homeowner. I don't buy it for not even a minute. I just don't. Because when people are in a situation like that, they're in a natural disaster, there are devastating outcomes there, homes are lost, property, personal items, everything is just topsy-turvy. Yes, that's an emotional situation, but you know what people want more than anything else? They want help. They want help. And the idea that it was only the Trump supporters where we encountered problems. They didn't really want help. They wanted to attack us. That's really what she's saying. And I have a question. I don't buy that one either. But what I also don't buy is what Deanne Criswell said, or Criswell, the head of FEMA. Basically, this is an isolated incident. It goes against our core values. It may go against FEMA's core values, but it clearly is not an isolated incident. And on that point, I fully agree with Marley Washington. This was a directive, and it was probably so broad, it was left to interpretation. And I think when she says, get on your job, media, request, see, they can do a Freedom of Information request, request these incident reports, she says, and it'll show you. And I think that's the move that they should be making right now. But there is someone else who is now weighing in on this. This woman, her name is Chelsea Nide, and she's a former FEMA employee. She says she worked at FEMA for years. She was deployed 66 times in 22 states, all covering natural disasters. She says she was deployed for Hurricane Katrina and many, many others. She has a slightly different take.
The big problem with all of this is that this didn't have to get spun out of control this far and this wide. It could have been resolved, shall we say, in-house on that disaster. And I've done that before in FEMA. I've been given unethical orders like this. And I didn't pass that on. And I also refused. And then I reported it directly to the FCO for full awareness, if that makes any sense. So the thing that's the problem that I see with what happened here is that, I can't tell whether or not she did that, she took those actions or not, but those actions would have quickly resolved and prevented an unethical order being sent down.
As I said during I think it was the last podcast when this story first broke, that there's no way that Marley Washington did this arbitrarily. Duh. She did get this as a directive from a higher up, or maybe several levels higher up. I don't know that, but what I do know, I'm calling this FEMA-gate because this is the tip of the iceberg. Now, the former employee, the woman that we just heard from, Chelsea Nide, she says that she's encountered this before. She says it's real simple. What you do, you just put it in writing and just clarifying, is this what you want me to do? And you send it up the chain, and that'll usually end it all. Well, maybe that happened in times gone by, but the reason I suspect, and I don't know if Marley Washington even did anything like that, maybe she didn't, but even if she did, there's a real chance that it would have gone nowhere, because while Deanne Criswell is the head of FEMA, she has a boss, because FEMA comes under the Department of Homeland Security. And you're saying, okay, and the Department of Homeland Security is run by a guy named Alejandro Mayorkas. Yeah, that Mayorkas. Alejandro Mayorkas spent 4 years straight lying to the American public, telling us that the border is secure. That's what Alejandro Mayorkas did. He told us the border's secure. This guy has been incredibly irresponsible and politically motivated. This is the same guy when the Border Patrol agents were accused of beating, horsewhipping the Haitian migrants. He didn't support them. He didn't say, well, let's look into it. This still would have gone down as a perpetual historical lie, were it not for the photographer that took that picture. He says, I was there. I don't have any political interest whatsoever, but I can tell you unequivocally, those agents were not beating the migrants. They just weren't doing that. So I'm suspect that Mayorkas would have done anything, but we'll see. Ms. Criswell, she says that the agency just doesn't stand for it. As a matter of fact, she says that they have referred this case for investigation. It went over to the special counsel's office, and we'll see what happens. This is a good opportunity for me to tie in my other little news tip. It has to do with President Trump's nominees for his cabinet. And if you notice, if you've listened to the press, all they've talked about is how grossly unqualified they are to assume these positions. And they're wondering about the sanity of President Trump for even selecting these people. We can look at Matt Gaetz, and they keep saying, if you listen, turn on your TV, this man is accused of sexual assault, of having sex with a minor, of rape. They go on and on and on. I just heard Adam Schiff out of California, senator out of California, yesterday, saying that there's no way he's going to get through because he sexually assaulted a young woman. And there's an ongoing investigation. The problem is, you had a couple of departments investigating this. One just dropped it right out, flat out, well over a year ago. Nothing there. The other one put it on pause. People have got to become more sophisticated. You just have to. If this guy has done all of these things and you allowed him to just continue to sit in Congress, one agency dropping the case altogether, the other one just holding it, let's just sit on this one. What are you doing sitting on a case like that? Either there's something there or there is not. And I'm leaning toward there is not, because either those who are currently running this thing, these agencies are so incredibly inept, they shouldn't be in office anyways, or they've been using their agencies for political power, using them as political tools. And that is what I truly suspect. Even with the Department of Homeland Security, which I just said is over FEMA, Trump's pick is Kristi Noem. Oh, no, she has no experience. She doesn't need to be there. No, there's no way we're going to confirm her. When you look at Pete Hegseth for the Department of Defense, oh my God, he's a Fox News weekend host. There's no way, it doesn't even make sense. There's no way he's capable of running an agency with 3 million employees. He can't do this. We can't allow this to happen. It'll hurt America. Hasn't it hurt America? The fact that for years, the Defense Department, what have we seen? We've seen people like Lloyd Austin, who, disappeared for a week, and thankfully he's okay. He had a medical situation. He didn't tell the president, he just left. But more importantly, he comes out of Raytheon, a major defense contractor. So you leave your defense contracting job to head the Department of Defense? Huh? This has been a quid pro quo situation in the Department of Defense. This has been discussed ad nauseum over the years. What do you hear people talk about this military defense industry where people, they make millions upon millions, oftentimes selling to our government things that are outdated, things that are not useful. So from where I stand, these people that Trump has identified to be cabinet members, they absolutely cannot do any worse than what we've seen over the last 4 years. In fact, I think they'll be refreshing. And I don't think that Pete Hegseth would have left our situation in Afghanistan the way Biden did it, the way Milley, the way Lloyd Austin did it. I don't think they would do it that way. And we cannot forget about the Department of Injustice. That's exactly what it's been under Merrick Garland. There is no doubt, there should be no question in the minds of anyone that the term lawfare has been most applicable under Merrick Garland. We can also look at all of the regular Americans, not Donald Trump, not high-profile political figures, but just regular Americans. We can look at parents who were deemed as domestic terrorists because they spoke out at school board meetings, because they wanted change, because they did not want boys in girls' bathrooms. We can look at pro-lifers who were spied upon, who were harassed, not by the hands of pro-abortionists, but by the hands of our Justice Department. We can look at Second Amendment supporters, people who just want their guns, people who follow the law and say, under the Constitution, under the Second Amendment, I have a right to own my gun. Why would our Justice Department try to get into in fact, why did they try to work with retailers to find out? So, who are these people? Tell me a little bit more, because they actually did do that. We can go on, and we can see how this Justice Department has been incredibly wired to go against the American people. So whoever Donald Trump winds up having over the Justice Department, hey, that's a vast improvement. Because when it's all said and done, the government belongs to the people, not a tiny select group of people, but the American people. And those who are elected by virtue of our vote, they're elected to move our country forward. They're elected to protect our nation and its people. And I say this so many times, I say this so often, they are here to serve the American public. We are not here to serve them. And that's what bothers me most. We have been so conditioned to believe that we should just be so grateful that they're here, and we're just going to do whatever they want us to do. Whatever they tell us, we'll swallow it whole. We'll believe it. Even when our eyes, even when our lives are telling us, no, something's wrong. So yeah, please believe me on this one. It will be a vast improvement to upset the apple cart, to get these these in and out of government, in and out of private sector, coming back, jumping back and forward, this revolving door that has served only one purpose, that is to increase the power and the finances of those people who have just built lifelong careers in our government. And need I say this? Yeah. How do you get to Washington, a regular Joe, and you leave out a multi-millionaire? We've got to put an end to it, and we will. You can find me on X at Deborah Rose Podcast. If you're on X, my handle is Hey Deborah. I'm on Facebook, Deborah Rose Podcast. I'm on YouTube, Deborah Rose Podcast. Instagram, same thing. Wherever you go, Deborah Rose Podcast. Leave a comment, drop me a line, suggest a topic, whatever you want to do. Look forward to it. Thanks so much.